Let's begin with a structural overview. Welcome to another lecture. Today we examine The Boys Season 5, a satirical superhero text that culminates a planned 5-season design by Eric Kripke. We shall map definitions, history, evidence, and the ethical puzzles that make this finale unusually resonant for our current media moment.
I guess we can start by thinking about the basics. I am Priyanka, a doctoral student who asks too many questions. And Professor Alexei is here to keep us honest and maybe a little uncomfortable, in a good way. We are talking about the final season that dropped on Prime Video in April 2026.
To frame our discussion in simpler terms, The Boys Season 5 is the last chapter of a darkly comic series about superheroes behaving like oligarchs, a show where power wears a cape while corporate PR writes the scripture, and where ordinary people must decide whether stopping a tyrant justifies abhorrent means. Season 5 maintains the franchise's signature mixture of gore, gallows humor, and pointed cultural satire, while bringing multi-season arcs to a decisive resolution.
Building on that, can we maybe define a few terms? Like, what exactly is a soup? What is compound V? And why is everyone suddenly worried about something called V1?
It's important to understand the basic lexicon. A soup is any superpowered individual in this universe, typically manufactured by Compound V, a serum distributed and monetized by Vought International. V1 refers to the earliest prototype of that serum, newly foregrounded this season, and for Homelander, it implies a path to potential immortality. Mathematically, if you will, we move from high power to unbounded duration, and the ethical functions become discontinuous. Meanwhile, Billy Butcher holds a countermeasure, a virus capable of killing all soups, creating a mutually assured destruction regime in which the mere existence of each weapon destabilizes every calculation of risk.
Moving on. Why does this matter beyond fandom? Like, how does this connect to power in the real world?
Season 5 is relevant because it stages a clean experiment in authority and accountability. Homelander functions as a fascist archetype driven by insecurity and ego, a portrait Kripke has articulated openly, and the political thread was conceived pre-2024 with the aim of a 1984-style depiction of creeping authoritarianism rather than headline chasing. The critique extends to corporatized heroism, where Vought packages morality as a product and an audience primed by spectacle accepts power's narrative as truth. We observe how consent can be manufactured when image saturates the public sphere.
It makes me wonder whether some viewers miss the point along the way. Like, the shiny suits are a distraction, but the show keeps telling us to look at the marketing machine behind them.
Clearly, and the season doubles down by deploying in-universe Vought social posts as marketing. For example, the A-Train deployment update in August 2024, which operates as both diegetic world-building and savvy promotion. In this context, satire is a methodological instrument, not mere ornament.
Okay, facts and history. Can we lay down a quick timeline for orientation?
Let's start with the history. Amazon Prime Video renewed the series for Season 5 in May 2024, and in June 2024, Eric Kripke announced it would be the final season, his long-planned apocalypse. Principal photography began in November 2024, reached midpoint by March 2025, and wrapped in July 2025. The world premiere occurred in Rome in March 2026, and streaming began in April 2026 with 2 episodes, then continued weekly through May 2026. A 4DX theatrical event screened the finale in May 2026, a telling gesture of how television can appropriate cinema's ritual for closure.
And the creative side, studios and people. Who should we remember here?
Studios include Sony Pictures Television and Amazon MGM Studios, with Point Grey Pictures, Original Film, Kripke Enterprises, Kickstart Entertainment, and KFL Night Sky. The returning cast is led by Carl Urban as Billy Butcher, Jack Quaid as Huey Campbell, Anthony Starr as Homelander, Erin Moriarty as Starlight, and the ensemble we have come to know. Notably, Jensen Ackles returns as Soldier Boy in a significant role exploring father-son dynamics with Homelander and a personal vendetta with Butcher. Guest and recurring turns include Jared Padalecki as Mr. Marathon, Misha Collins as Mel Chemical, Giancarlo Esposito as Stan Edgar, and Samuel L. Jackson voicing Xander the Shark. The spin-off Gen V intersects through Marie Moreau, Jordan Lee, and Emma Meyer, and Teenage Kicks members add texture to Vaught's assembly line of branded heroism.
And the reception. Numbers and critics. Can we quantify the response a bit?
Nielsen reported about 0.9 billion minutes streamed in the US for the premiere week in April 2026, with the two-episode opener comprising roughly 64% of viewing and a 65% share among ages 18 to 49. Prime Video claimed 57 million viewers per episode globally within 5 weeks, which we should treat as platform-reported rather than independently audited. Critically, Rotten Tomatoes recorded 97% approval, with an average of 7.55 out of 10, while Metacritic logged 75 out of 100, a generally favorable consensus. The season was praised for audacity, character payoffs, and social commentary, with some pacing critiques in the early stretch.
I'm curious about the music, since goodbyes need a sound, right?
Indeed, composers Matt Bowen and Christopher Leonards escalated the orchestral palette, delivering the franchise's largest opening cue and a farewell tone. An original number, Raise Him Up, performed in Episode 7 with Daveed Diggs as O Father, functions as tonal misdirection and narrative punctuation immediately before a shattering turn. It is worth noting how music here operates as thesis and antithesis in one movement. Before we go to the grand questions, a brief personal note. As someone raised in a country where official narratives could be baroque and brutal at once, I find the show's preoccupation with image-making eerily familiar. Chess teaches us that a trapped king projects confidence until the final move. Power, too, often mistakes performance for permanence.
Thank you, Professor. That sets the stakes nicely. So, 3 big questions. First, what if Homelander had never discovered V1? Second, what if Frenchie survived Episode 7? Third, how does the show's portrait of authoritarianism map to real life?
Let's transition to another aspect. Big question 1. Homelander without V1. The lead-up is clear. Homelander seeks potential immortality through the earliest compound V, while Butcher possesses a soup-killing virus. The system resembles a deterrence game, where each side's ultimate weapon changes the payoff matrix for every lesser move. Remove V1, and Homelander's horizon shortens. He remains almost invulnerable, but time ceases to be his ally, which reintroduces strategic patience for his opponents, since a finite tyrant invites attrition strategies, soft power erosion, and coalition building. Conversely, with immortality on the table, every delay compounds risk geometrically, pushing the boys toward catastrophic options sooner.
I'm curious about the virus plan itself. If Homelander never chased immortality, does the moral calculus for deploying a doomsday bioweapon become any less terrible? Or is it still an unforgivable line?
It's crucial to understand that deterrence corrupts by design. Historically, mutual annihilation schemes can prevent war, while normalizing apocalyptic thinking. In this case, a universal anti-soup pathogen is not a scalpel but an extinction lever. Even without V1, the ethical problem remains acute because you cannot target the guilty exclusively. Hence the show's insistence on irreversible choices in its final structure. The more immortal the tyrant appears, the more plausible the unthinkable becomes to the resistance. We can infer a grim lesson. Bad options get worse as horizons lengthen for the powerful.
So maybe the show is warning us that waiting for perfect solutions is a luxury, but also that shortcuts cost souls, that tension is the point.
Precisely, and Kripke's framing of the season as an apocalypse clarifies that survival guarantees are suspended, which is narratively liberating and morally terrifying.
Okay, big question 2. What if Frenchie survived episode 7? I keep wondering about Kimiko's arc without that loss. Could the finale's emotional equations hold?
The text gives us a clear authorial rationale. Kripke indicated that a member of the boys needed to die before the finale, and Frenchie's death yields the greatest emotional resonance due to his bond with Kimiko, a choice supported by actor Tomer Capone and thematically tied to Frenchie's language of dance as survival. If he survived, two shifts occur. First, Kimiko's resolve would be motivated by hope rather than grief, which softens the urgency and may dilute the finale's sense that the ledger can never be balanced. Second, team cohesion would remain less fragile, inviting strategies built on tenderness when the show is insisting on consequences. In simpler terms, the loss contracts the narrative, making every subsequent decision carry memorial gravity.
But could we not get similar weight by nearly losing him? Like a brush with death that galvanizes everyone without the finality?
Arguably not at this narrative altitude. Final seasons recalibrate audience memory of the entire run, which is why Kripke speaks of landing the plane. Near misses restore the status quo ante. True endings demand the arithmetic of cost. Episode 7 makes this explicit by framing a show-stopping number, raise him up, as momentary uplift, and then collapsing that buoyancy into irrevocable absence. The juxtaposition asserts that artifice and hope exist, but they do not repeal mortality.
And it sits beside the season's other audacities, like Samuel L. Jackson voicing a shark, which is hilarious, but also proof that even jokes can carry plot oxygen when placed right before a suffocating turn.
Well observed. The show uses spectacle as counterpoint. Sometimes levity is the color that makes the black darker.
On to our next point. Big question 3. Authoritarianism now. The showrunners said the political thread was conceived pre-2024, yet some lines in episode 7 apparently echoed real discourse. How do we responsibly map fiction to reality without forcing one to equal the other?
We proceed by structure rather than surface. The Boys models how personality cults exploit media ecologies, how corporations like Vought launder violence through branding, how spectacle creates epistemic fog, and how compliant institutions enable rule by grievance. The Chris Hayes cameo at a White House presser and the celebrity meta cameos at Mr. Marathon's party are not mere Easter eggs, but mechanism demonstrations. Real-world media personae folded into fiction to increase the coefficient of plausibility. When life echoes a scripted line, it is less prophecy than a robust model encountering data.
So, the cultural impact question. Does satire like this change minds, or only entertain the already convinced?
The evidence is mixed across media studies, but we can suggest useful research directions. First, measure shifts in trust toward institutions after exposure to diegetic PR, like Vaught's social post. Second, Analyze attention flows around weekly drops versus binge patterns, noting that Season 5's two-episode launch, plus weekly cadence, sustained water cooler cycles, and likely amplified the 4DX finale event. Third, study soundtrack cueing of moral salience, as with Raise Him Up preceding tragedy. Most importantly, map how real journalists inside fiction alter perceived credibility of satire. The show's own metrics indicate strong reach, though we must flag Prime Video's 57 million per episode claim as platform reported rather than independently audited.
Maybe it is enough that the series reframes how we remember heroes. The Seven looks like a brand, Teenage Kicks looks like a feeder system, and the whole thing reads as an industry more than a calling.
This logically leads us to the finale's reputation. Critics broadly endorsed the ending's payoffs, even while some noted pacing and focus issues. The season functions as a capstone that makes earlier chapters read differently in hindsight, which is precisely what a designed 5-act structure promises.
So, I guess that kind of sums it up. A satirical exploration of power that ends on purpose, not by accident, with music swelling like a curtain call and numbers to prove people watched.
To summarize, The Boys Season 5 concludes a planned 5-season arc by placing Butcher's soup-killing virus opposite Homelander's pursuit of immortality via V1. We asked 3 questions. What happens to deterrence if immortality disappears? What Frenchie's survival would steal from the finale's moral weight? And how the show's portrait of authoritarianism models real dynamics of media, branding, and power. For further study, one may examine Gen V, set roughly 6 months earlier in continuity, to trace how institutional pipelines manufacture both heroes and crises.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you for listening. Another lecture will return with more inconvenient questions and the occasional shark voiced by Samuel L. Jackson in our dreams.
This concludes our lecture for today.